He's just a spoiled, isn't he? And he says that the king doesn't talk to him over this. Well, who can blame the king? It's just absolute nonsense. Absolute nonsense. I mean, the man is losing his mind, if you ask me.
Doing the rounds, saying, please pick up your phones, no one's talking to me. He looks just like Thomas Markle.
What if I told you that we're watching the complete breakdown of a modern royal, not in battle armor or court intrigue, but live on television, in courtrooms, and across desperate interviews?
I love my country. I always have done. Despite what some people in that country have done.
Not long ago, Prince Harry stood as one of the most recognizable, protected, and privileged individuals on Earth. A man born into a life of unimaginable access, revered lineage, and government-funded security that most heads of state envy. But now, that same man is sitting in a California mansion, isolated from his family, abandoned by the institution that once defended his every move, and publicly unraveling.
Harry has spoken candidly about the breakdown of his relationship with his father and other members of the royal family.
And it's not just a tabloid headline, it's real. In a matter of days, he's lost his final appeal for royal protection. His family has gone silent. His media deals are collapsing. And the image of a noble rebel prince has been replaced with that of a man clinging to the last threads of public sympathy.
Whether I have an official role or not is irrelevant to the threats, risks, and impact.
The shocking part? He lit the match himself. This isn't a royal feud. This is a full-on implosion. And today, we're pulling back the curtain on what might be the final act of Prince Harry's royal downfall. A collapse built on entitlement, paranoia, and decisions that burned every bridge behind him.
It has been a surprise as well as not a surprise. For the time being, it's impossible for me to take my family back to the UK.
That's just absolute nonsense. Absolute nonsense. I mean, the man is losing his mind, if you ask me.
It all came crashing down on May 2nd, 2025. After nearly 5 years of legal battles, appeals, and high-profile statements, the British Court of Appeal delivered its final ruling on Prince Harry's desperate attempt to regain taxpayer-funded police protection. The decision wasn't just a routine denial, it was a judicial sledgehammer that obliterated every argument Harry had spent millions to construct. 3 of the UK's top judges, Lord Justice Bean, Lady Justice McCurr, and Lord Justice Singh, were unanimous. Prince Harry's case had no legal merit. His sense of grievance, they said, wasn't a legal argument. His claims of procedural unfairness? Baseless. His royal blood? Irrelevant. This was not a close call. This wasn't a legal gray area. It was a decisive public slapdown, and it left Harry without a single legal option left.
There's the duty of care because, as I said, life is precious, and it is very clear that from 2020, because I was no longer allowed an official role and because I decided to remove myself eventually from the institution, that my life got devalued from the highest score to the lowest score.
But it didn't end there. Instead of quietly accepting defeat, as most people would after such a public and expensive legal collapse, Harry immediately went into meltdown mode. Within hours of the ruling, he was on the phone with the BBC, spiraling into bizarre theories and suggesting that his own family had infiltrated government committees to sabotage him. Yes, his own father's household was now, in his eyes, part of a coordinated conspiracy to destroy him. He accused the Revered Committee, the independent panel in charge of royal and VIP security, of being manipulated. He suggested that the system was rigged, and he implied that his life was being deliberately put at risk by the very monarchy he once served. This wasn't just disappointing, it was dangerous. The BBC interview revealed a man no longer grounded in reality, spinning tales of betrayal and vengeance. And while Harry believed he was fighting for justice, the world saw something else. A once beloved prince, now lost in his own echo chamber of entitlement and paranoia. To truly understand the magnitude of Harry's collapse, we have to rewind to a time before the drama, to a moment when his protection wasn't just about safety, it was about power, status, control. Back in early 2020, Prince Harry lived in a world unlike any other. At that time, being a senior working royal came with a level of personal security that was almost mythic. We're not talking about a couple of bodyguards, we're talking about fully armed police police units, intelligence coordination from MI5, Scotland Yard, and even international agencies, all focused on keeping one man safe. When Harry traveled, entire neighborhoods were locked down, buildings were swept for explosives, air traffic was rerouted, surveillance drones were deployed, emergency response teams were on standby. Why? Because protecting Harry wasn't just about him, it was about the monarchy itself. Every royal appearance was a carefully choreographed display of British stability, tradition, and influence. The security wasn't just physical, it was social. It showed the world that the UK protects its own, that harming a prince meant declaring war on an institution older than most countries. And Harry? He didn't just benefit from this, he depended on it. He was used to never booking his own flights, never arranging his own lodging, never having to wonder whether a venue was safe. His entire existence was wrapped in the invisible armor of the crown. But here's where everything started to crumble. When Harry and Meghan announced their step back in February 2020, they thought they could have it both ways. Leave the duties, keep the perks. Build a brand in California, but hold on to the royal-level protection. They assumed that birthright meant lifetime immunity, but they misunderstood something crucial. Security wasn't a royal birthright. It was a job benefit. And when you quit the job, you lose the benefits. The revered committee, which evaluates who qualifies for state-funded security, made it clear Harry was now a private citizen. Any future protection would be assessed case by case, based on actual threat levels, not titles or feelings. And just like that, the walls closed in. Harry's world, once insulated by teams of professionals and millions in government spending, was gone. He would now have to hire his own bodyguards, pay out of pocket for surveillance, and manage threats like any other wealthy individual. He was no longer a prince in practice. He was a brand, a former royal, a civilian. And for someone who had never lived outside that palace-built bubble, the adjustment wasn't just hard, it was humiliating. By early 2020, the fairy tale had officially cracked. Harry and Meghan had stunned the world with their announcement. They would step back from their roles as senior royals and pursue a more independent life, splitting their time between the UK and North America. The idea? Escape the constraints of royal life while keeping the perks that came with it. But what they failed to grasp was this: you can't quit the job and still expect the benefits. They truly believed they could build a personal brand, monetize their fame, and stay protected by British taxpayers, all without serving the monarchy. But reality hit hard. When they left, they didn't just walk away from royal duties. They triggered a legal and constitutional reset. The revered committee, which oversees VIP security in the UK, stepped in and made it clear. Harry was no longer a working royal. That meant no more automatic protection, no more diplomatic privileges, and no more state-funded bodyguards following him across the globe. And here's the thing, this wasn't some personal attack. It was a matter of national policy. The UK government doesn't fund private citizens' security, even if they're royal by blood. Protection decisions are based on real-time threat assessments, not personal feelings or family drama. But Harry couldn't accept it. To him, stepping back didn't mean stepping down. He still saw himself as a royal, as someone deserving of the state's full protective force. He believed his former status should still entitle him to armed guards and surveillance teams. But in the eyes of the law, he was now just another wealthy celebrity. And that's when his legal war began. He launched a 5-year battle, spending untold millions to fight for the restoration of his full royal security. And through it all, he insisted that this wasn't about vanity or entitlement. It was about safety. But when it came time to present actual evidence of threats, Harry's case began to crumble. The judges weren't swayed by emotional arguments or titles. They wanted proof. And when it became clear that Harry's claims were based on feelings rather than facts, the court responded with a cold, decisive no. This wasn't just a loss in the courtroom. It was a symbolic defeat, because it shattered the illusion Harry had clung to, that he could exist halfway between palace and private life, that he could be both outsider and insider, that he could reject the crown but still benefit from its protection. But the truth had finally caught up to him, and what came next would only make things worse. If there was ever a moment to pause, regroup, and move on quietly, this was it. Instead, Harry did the opposite. Just hours after the court's ruling was made public, he jumped straight into a media frenzy. He called up the BBC. He spoke to journalists. He made statements that stunned even his critics, but not because they were bold, because they were bizarre. Rather than accept the ruling like most people would, Harry launched into a set of of claims that sounded more like a thriller novel than real life. He alleged that the royal household had infiltrated the revered committee, the very panel that had revoked his security. He suggested that his own family had influenced the decision, knowing it would put his life at risk. He wasn't just blaming the system. He was accusing King Charles, the British government, and the crown itself of colluding to make him vulnerable. And this is where things took a darker turn. According to court documents, Harry had been given every opportunity to present evidence of specific threats. But when the time came, he failed to provide anything credible. The court found that his concerns were based on speculation, not actionable intelligence. Even more dangerous, the judges noted that Harry had actually been treated more favorably than most applicants. If anything, his royal status had helped him, not hurt him. But none of that mattered to Harry, because in his mind, the truth wasn't in the evidence, it was in the narrative. And his narrative was simple. I'm being punished for leaving the royal family. I'm being targeted because I wanted independence. And now they want me unprotected. It wasn't just paranoia. It was a full transformation from prince to conspiracy theorist. He spoke about how his life had been devalued by the institution. He claimed there was no longer a duty of care from the royal family. And instead of showing any humility after losing in court, he doubled down on a victim complex that now seemed completely detached from reality. And while all of this was playing out in public, something even more dangerous was unfolding behind the scenes. Because while Harry was complaining about betrayal, lawsuits, and conspiracies, his financial foundation was quietly collapsing. Netflix, Spotify, Archewell, everything was starting to fall apart. And Harry was too distracted by the war in his mind to see the real threat forming at his doorstep. While Prince Harry was busy spinning conspiracy theories in front of BBC cameras, something far more damaging was happening quietly. And this time, it wasn't just a PR crisis, it was financial. Because behind the scenes at Netflix, the very deal that had been sold to the public as Harry and Meghan's path to independence was on the verge of collapse. Back in 2020, the world had watched as the Sussexes inked a staggering $100 million contract with the streaming giant. At the time, it looked like a power move, their exit from the royal family paired with a lucrative media empire. But fast forward to 2025, and the numbers tell a very different story. Netflix was now rethinking everything. Their most recent release, a polo documentary, personally led by Harry. It flopped quietly, embarrassingly. It barely made a ripple, with viewership numbers so low they were buried beneath lifestyle vloggers and dating shows. Meghan's own project, With Love, Meghan, a cooking and lifestyle series, fared no better. Despite the massive platform and media push, it drew just 12.6 million viewing hours in its first week. In contrast, their controversial 2022 docuseries had pulled in over 80 million. The message was clear. The public wasn't interested anymore. The royal drama had run dry, and the couple's content, now stripped of explosive revelations, felt hollow, vain, forgettable. Worse still, leaks from inside Netflix revealed something savage. Ted Sarandos, the same CEO who once called Meghan a rock star, was reportedly planning to cut Harry from any future projects entirely. The next deal, if it even happened, would involve no upfront payments, just revenue splits, and only if the content performed. In short, Netflix was done risking on Harry. This wasn't just a business decision, it was a public downgrade, a quiet admission that Harry's value was no longer tied to his talent, but to a story he had already told. Once, loudly, repeatedly, and now there was nothing left to sell. But Netflix wasn't the only domino to fall. Their Spotify deal, worth an estimated $25 million, had already been terminated in 2023 after producing just one podcast season and minimal content. Reports from Spotify insiders described the Sussexes as lazy and overly difficult to work with. One executive even said the company had been tricked. Meanwhile, their Archewell Foundation, the nonprofit intended to solidify their image as global changemakers, was struggling. Donations were down, corporate partnerships were evaporating, public goodwill nearly gone. And as all of this happened, the expenses kept piling up. Staff salaries, Montecito mansion maintenance, private security costs, all burning through money at a speed even royal wealth couldn't sustain. For the first time in their post-royal life, Harry and Meghan were looking at the very thing they never thought they'd face: financial instability. Here's the part that stings most. And it's not about money, it's about relevance. Because while Harry's brand was tanking, Meghan was quietly repositioning herself, not as royalty, not as a victim, but as As a modern American influencer, complete with product partnerships, lifestyle branding, and a carefully curated public image, Netflix insiders hinted at it first. Meghan still had commercial appeal. Her brand, beauty, lifestyle, fashion, could stand on its own. She could collaborate, endorse, launch. People still listened. They still clicked. But Harry, he had no product, no clear voice, no story left to tell. His only currency had ever been his connection to the royal family. But once that story was told, in books, interviews, documentaries, there was nothing else. He couldn't pivot into lifestyle content. He wasn't a public speaker with fresh ideas. He wasn't an entrepreneur or an activist. He had built an entire post-royal identity on being angry, and the world had moved on. Even Netflix saw it. Their internal discussions pointed to one conclusion: Meghan was marketable. Harry was not. That's why the rumored restructuring of their media deal focused on her brand, as ever, while potentially cutting Harry out altogether. It wasn't personal, it was business. But from the outside looking in, it looked humiliating. The couple that had once presented themselves as a united front, a team walking away from the crown hand in hand, were now clearly being evaluated individually, and only one of them was still in demand. Behind the scenes, Meghan was meeting with venture capitalists, exploring fashion lines, and expanding her personal footprint in the wellness and beauty space. Harry, meanwhile, was stuck in a shrinking orbit, unable to pivot, unable to evolve, and increasingly invisible. The worst part? His downfall wasn't just financial, it was emotional, identity-shattering, because Harry wasn't just losing money, he was losing the last thread of who he used to be. The prince, the soldier, the respected public figure. All of it was gone, replaced with a narrative that now defined him not by what he stood for, but by what he had lost. And just when things couldn't get worse, the royal family cut the final cord. And that's what we'll explore next. If there was any hope for reconciliation, any sliver of connection between Prince Harry and his family, it ended here. Following his courtroom defeat and spiraling media campaign, even the most sympathetic royals had enough. King Charles, who had once walked Meghan down the aisle, who had quietly provided millions to help them transition into private life, who had tried to keep communication alive despite the public fallout, finally went silent. No more texts, no more calls, no more effort. And this time, it wasn't out of pettiness. It was self-preservation. Because Charles, battling serious health issues, didn't just see a son anymore. He saw a threat. A man who had publicly aired family secrets, weaponized private conversations, and now accused the monarchy of sabotaging his safety. But what truly stunned royal insiders was Harry's reaction to that silence. Instead of introspection or accountability, Harry responded with another round of public blame. In his BBC interview, he claimed his father wouldn't speak to him because of this security stuff. He said reconciliation would be nice, but added that the royal family had chosen to devalue his life. A subtle but explosive accusation. And it didn't stop with Charles. William, once Harry's closest ally, had completely shut him out. Sources from inside the palace said William, Kate, and Queen Camilla had formed what they called a united front, a silent pact that no reconciliation would happen as long as Harry continued to lash out publicly. To them, Harry had crossed a line, not by leaving the family, but by turning that departure into a brand, a profit model, a vendetta. And in the background, as Harry begged for someone to pick up the phone, the comparisons began, quietly but devastatingly. He looked just like Thomas Markle. The estranged father of Meghan Markle had spent years doing interviews, sending letters, begging for attention after being shut out by his daughter. Now, Harry was doing the same, cut off from his family, crying out in interviews, and unable to accept that maybe, just maybe, the silence was earned. Royal experts noted the irony. Harry had become the very thing he once criticized, a family outcast chasing headlines while his loved ones quietly moved on. And it wasn't just awkward anymore, it was tragic. Here's the uncomfortable truth no one wants to say out loud. Prince Harry has become exactly what he rebelled against. He left the royal family to escape the spotlight, but now chases it harder than ever. He denounced the media, but uses it whenever he needs sympathy. He claimed to protect his family's privacy, but sold their story to the highest bidder. And now, as he finds himself increasingly isolated, he's blaming the very institution that once protected him for not protecting him anymore. The most painful irony? The monarchy he tried to distance himself from is the only thing that ever gave him purpose. Without it, he's lost. The courts have closed the door on his legal claims. The palace has stopped returning his calls. His Netflix contract is shrinking, and his public image has gone from noble outsider to bitter former royal. And in his attempt to control the narrative, he's ended up losing it completely. His paranoia has overtaken his logic. His victimhood has eclipsed his identity. He speaks now not like a prince with dignity, but like a man convinced the world owes him something, and refuses to admit that maybe he was wrong. The BBC interview, once intended to defend himself, became a mirror, and what we saw was someone not fighting for justice, but someone desperate to be relevant again. So now we're left with the final question. Is this the point of no return? Or can Prince Harry still be redeemed? Can the man who burned every bridge rebuild them? Or is he destined to fade, a former royal lost in a mansion of regrets and missed opportunities? Let us know in the comments below. Should the royal family forgive him? Or has he gone too far? Because in the end, sometimes the hardest lesson to learn is that freedom comes with a cost, and Prince Harry is finally realizing what that cost truly is.